They say it takes a village to raise a child, but I didn't realize it also takes one to destroy a marriage. It's funny, really. While I was at home fixing school lunches and managing our family schedule, my wife was volunteering with the principal in ways that didn't involve bake sales. Turns out the only thing she was organizing was my downfall. My name is Ethan, and I've been married to Amanda for 10 years. Together, we have a 7-year-old daughter named Harper, who's the kind of kid you secretly hope you'll get when you decide to have children. Smart, kind, and genuinely curious about the world. Our life wasn't perfect. Whose is? But it was stable. Or so I thought. I work as a project manager at a construction firm, a job that keeps me busy but allows me enough flexibility to be a hands-on dad. Amanda has always been the social one in our marriage, the person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 10 new friends. She worked part-time as a marketing consultant, but her real passion was getting involved in Harper's school community. That's where it all began. It started about a year ago when Amanda joined the PTA. At first, I thought it was a great idea. Harper had just started 2nd grade, and Amanda seemed genuinely excited about getting more involved. She began attending meetings, organizing events, and spearheading fundraisers. She even joined the volunteer committee, working closely with the school staff to plan everything from teacher appreciation lunches to field trips. Her enthusiasm was contagious. She'd come home from meetings buzzing with ideas, talking about how she and the other parents were going to transform the school into a shining example of community involvement. I was proud of her, and honestly, a little relieved. Amanda had always been the type who needed a project to sink her teeth into, and the PTA seemed like a productive, harmless outlet. The name Mark came up early in her stories. Mark Lawson, the principal. According to Amanda, he was the kind of leader every school needed. Charismatic, approachable, and deeply committed to the kids' education. She spoke about him with admiration, recounting how he stayed late to help set up events or brainstormed creative ways to secure funding for new programs. At first, I thought nothing of it. Amanda had always been passionate about the people she worked with, and it made sense that she'd talk about the principal. After all, they were collaborating on most of these projects. But over time, I started noticing little things that didn't quite add up. Amanda's involvement in the PTA quickly escalated from a few hours a week to what felt like a full-time job. She was always at the school, even on days when no events were scheduled. She'd come home late, claiming she'd been brainstorming with Mark or helping him sort out some paperwork. She started dressing a little differently, too. Nothing drastic, but her casual jeans and sweaters were gradually replaced with more polished outfits. I chalked it up to her wanting to make a good impression. Amanda had always cared about appearances, and if she wanted to look her best while representing the PTA, who was I to complain? But then there were the phone calls. Amanda started taking more calls in private, stepping out of the room whenever her phone buzzed. She'd smile at the screen a little too brightly before disappearing into another room. When I asked about it, she waved it off, saying it was just PTA stuff. Again, I let it slide. After all, I trusted her. The real turning point came when Amanda suggested I take over some of the household responsibilities so she could focus more on her volunteer work. She argued that it was important for Harper to see her mom making a difference, that she wanted to set a good example. I agreed. Reluctantly, but I agreed. So, I started packing Harper's lunches, handling morning drop-offs, and even taking on some of Amanda's usual errands. Meanwhile, Amanda spent more and more time at the school, working closely with Mark on what she described as game-changing initiatives. I should have seen the signs earlier. Looking back, it was all so obvious. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she lit up when she talked about Mark. But when you're in the thick of it, when you've built a life with someone and shared so many years together, it's easier to rationalize than to confront. I convinced myself that Amanda was simply passionate about her work with the PTA, that she was investing in Harper's future by helping improve the school. I ignored the growing unease in my gut, telling myself I was being paranoid. But paranoia has a funny way of creeping in when you least expect it. One night, while Amanda was out at yet another PTA meeting, I found myself scrolling through our shared calendar. I noticed a series of entries marked school planning session that didn't align with any PTA events I was aware of. Curious, I decided to check Harper's school website to see if I'd missed something. There were no planning sessions listed. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen, the first flicker of doubt taking root. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. When Amanda came home that night, she was glowing, her energy high as she recounted the details of the meeting. I smiled and nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the discrepancies I'd noticed. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like there was a wall between us, an invisible barrier that kept me on the outside of her world. And deep down, I knew that wall wasn't built overnight. Trust is a funny thing. You don't realize how fragile it is until it's tested. When I first noticed the small inconsistencies in Amanda's stories, I told myself I was imagining things. But the cracks in the foundation of our marriage were growing, and it was only a matter of time before the whole structure came crashing down. After that night, with the suspicious calendar entries, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Amanda continued to throw herself into her PDA work with the same unrelenting energy, but now I saw her actions in a new light. Every late night at the school, every hush phone call, every casual mention of Mark Lawson made my stomach twist. I started paying closer attention. Amanda had always been meticulous about her calendar, color-coding events and appointments to keep track of her busy schedule. But as I scanned through her entries over the next few weeks, I noticed more of those vague school planning session blocks, often marked during times when no PDA events were listed online. I checked Harper's school website religiously, looking for any mention of these sessions, but they were never there. Then there were the text messages. Amanda had never been secretive about her phone before. She'd leave it lying around, unlocked, without a second thought. But now she kept it with her at all times. When a message would pop up, she'd glance at it and smile faintly before locking the screen. If I asked who it was, she'd brush it off as PDA stuff or one of the other parents. It wasn't until one evening, when Amanda left her phone charging in the kitchen while she showered, that I decided to look. I told myself I wasn't snooping, I just wanted to ease my mind. What I found did the opposite. The text thread with Mark was buried under a generic contact name. Just him. At first, it seemed innocent enough. They discussed PDA projects, school improvements, and upcoming events. But as I scrolled further, the tone of the messages shifted. Mark complimented Amanda frequently, calling her brilliant, indispensable, and inspiring. She responded in kind, praising his leadership and dedication. On the surface, it could have been harmless, but the sheer volume of their exchanges felt excessive. They texted late into the night, long after the rest of the PDA had likely gone to bed. Then I found the photo. It was tucked into the middle of the thread, sent by Mark during one of their late-night exchanges. It was a selfie of him in his office, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his smile smug and casual. Beneath it, Amanda had replied with a laughing emoji and the words, "You're terrible. But I guess I'll let it slide this time." My hands shook as I stared at the screen. The context of the photo wasn't explicit, but it didn't need to be. There was an intimacy in their exchange that went far beyond professional boundaries. I put the phone down before Amanda finished her shower, my mind racing with questions I wasn't ready to ask. Over the next few days, I started piecing together the timeline of Amanda's interactions with Mark. I combed through our bank statements, looking for charges that didn't add up. Sure enough, there were receipts for coffee shops and restaurants near the school, places Amanda had never mentioned visiting. There were also a few charges for late-night Ubers, rides she claimed were for PDA errands. The final straw came when Harper casually mentioned that she'd seen Mr. Lawson drop Mommy off at home one afternoon. She said it so innocently, her voice filled with the same admiration Amanda always used when talking about him. I forced myself to smile and nod, but inside, my suspicions solidified into certainty. Amanda wasn't just volunteering at Harper's school. She was volunteering a part of herself she had no right to give away. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more. I started documenting everything. I took screenshots of the messages with Mark, saved photos of the suspicious calendar entries, and kept a running list of the unexplained expenses. I even started tracking her whereabouts using the family locator app we'd set up years ago for emergencies. What I found confirmed what I already knew. Amanda's PDA meetings often took place at odd hours, in locations that had nothing to do with the school. One night, while she claimed to be helping Mark plan an upcoming fundraiser. The locator app showed her at a small boutique hotel across town. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, as the realization hit me. She wasn't just lying. She was actively betraying me. The most painful part was pretending everything was normal. Every morning, I'd pack Harper's lunch, drop her off at school, and wave goodbye to Amanda as she headed out for another productive day. Every evening, I'd sit across from her at dinner, listening to her talk about the progress she and Mark were making on their projects. And every night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the woman I'd built my life with could be so deceitful. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was losing the version of her I thought I knew. But I wasn't going to let her continue living this double life without consequences. I wasn't ready to confront Amanda yet, but I was getting closer. The evidence was piling up, and with every new discovery, my resolve grew stronger. She thought she could hide behind her PDA work, that I'd never noticed the cracks in her story. But she was wrong. They say when you start looking for something, you usually find it, and not always in the way you expect. That's how it felt when I decided to uncover what Amanda had been doing during her late nights and suspicious meetings. I thought I was prepared for the truth, but nothing could have prepared me for just how deep the betrayal ran. After weeks of watching Amanda's increasingly strange behavior, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to dig into her life, starting with the most obvious place, our shared laptop. Amanda had always used it for PDA work, claiming it was easier to manage everything on one device. I waited until she was out at another planning session with Mark and opened the laptop, determined to find answers. The first thing I noticed was her browser history. It was clean, too clean. Amanda wasn't usually the type to clear her history, and the sight of an empty search log made my stomach drop. It felt deliberate, as though she'd gone out of her way to hide what she'd been doing. I dug deeper, searching through her files. Most of them were harmless, spreadsheets for PDA budgets, event flyers, and meeting notes. But then I found a folder labeled Gala Planning. It seemed innocent enough, but something about it felt off. Inside the folder were dozens of documents, including receipts, emails, and photos. At first glance, everything looked legitimate. Expenses for decorations, catering invoices, and email chains discussing the logistics of the upcoming event. But as I scrolled through the files, I noticed a few receipts that didn't make sense. Charges for late-night dinners at high-end restaurants, spa treatments, and a boutique hotel. The hotel receipts were the worst. They weren't just vague bookings. They listed Amanda's name alongside Mark's. The dates matched nights she claimed to be at PDA meetings. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen, the realization hitting me like a freight train. Amanda and Mark weren't just meeting for work. They were meeting for something far more personal. But it didn't stop there. Buried among the receipts was a folder of photos. Most of them were typical PDA images, group shots from events, pictures of kids at fundraisers. But as I scrolled, I found something I wasn't expecting. Selfies of Amanda and Mark. The photos were casual, taken in what appeared to be his office. In one, Amanda was laughing, her head tilted back as Mark leaned into the frame, his hand on her shoulder. In another, they were sitting side by side at a table, papers spread out in front of them, their expressions too comfortable, too close. And then there was the photo that broke me. It was a picture of Amanda standing in what looked like a hotel room. She was smiling at the camera, wearing the same black dress she'd worn to a previous PDA event. Mark was in the background, his tie loosened, his gaze focused entirely on her. The intimacy of the image was undeniable. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle had finally come together, and the picture they painted wasn't just betrayal. It was a life I hadn't been part of, a secret world Amanda had created with Mark while I'd been at home, raising our daughter and believing in a lie. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not like this. Instead, I started documenting everything. I saved the receipts, the emails, and the photos, organizing them into a file that left no room for doubt. I went through our bank statements, cross-referencing every charge with the receipts I'd found. The pattern was clear. Amanda and Mark had been siphoning money from the PDA to fund their affair. The weight of it all was suffocating. It wasn't just that Amanda had betrayed me. It was that she'd used the very community she claimed to care about as a cover for her lies. But the worst moment came from a completely unexpected source. Harper. One evening, as I was helping her with her homework, she mentioned how much she liked Mr. Lawson. She said he was really nice, and that he'd given Mommy a ride home from school one day. She laughed as she told me about how they'd stopped for ice cream on the way, her tone innocent and cheerful. I forced a smile, my heart breaking as I listened. Harper had no idea what was really going on, no idea that her mom and her principal were using her school as their personal playground. That night, as Amanda came home late once again, I watched her walk through the door with a carefree smile, her hair slightly tousled, and her cheeks flushed. She kissed me on the cheek and said the meeting had been productive. I nodded, my expression neutral, but inside I was seething. The evidence was piling up, and the lies were unraveling faster than she realized. She thought she could keep this hidden, that I'd never noticed the cracks in her story. But she was wrong. I wasn't just uncovering the truth. I was preparing to bring it to light in a way she'd never forget. There's something liberating about the moment you decide enough is enough. The moment you stop asking questions, stop doubting yourself, and start taking control. For weeks, I'd lived with the weight of Amanda's betrayal, collecting evidence and pretending everything was normal. But as I pieced together the story of her affair with Mark, my anger transformed into resolve. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about making sure she felt the consequences of her actions. Amanda's PTA gala was the perfect opportunity. She'd spent weeks planning the event with Mark, pouring all her energy into what she described as the highlight of the school year. It was set to be a grand affair, attended by parents, teachers, and school board members. Amanda had been buzzing with excitement, proudly telling me how the gala would showcase the PTA's achievements. What she didn't know was that I had plans of my own. The night of the gala, I arrived early, dressed in a sharp suit and carrying a nondescript USB drive. The venue was bustling with activity. Parents mingling, staff members greeting guests, and volunteers putting the finishing touches on the decorations. Amanda and Mark were at the center of it all, moving through the crowd like a polished team. Amanda spotted me as I entered, her face lighting up with surprise. She hadn't expected me to come, but I'd played my part well, pretending to be the supportive husband who believed in her work. I smiled back, the kind of smile that masked everything I was about to do. The evening unfolded as planned, with dinner, speeches, and a slideshow showcasing the PTA's accomplishments. Amanda took the stage at one point, delivering a heartfelt speech about community, teamwork, and the importance of supporting our children's education. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. As the crowd applauded, I made my way to the tech booth at the back of the room. The AV team was managing the presentation slides and music, their attention focused on the screens in front of them. I approached the lead tech, a friendly-looking guy in his mid-30s, and told him I had an updated video for the slideshow. "This is from Amanda," I said, handing him the USB drive. She wanted this to be a surprise addition for the end of the presentation. He nodded, taking the drive without question and loaded it onto the system. The next hour passed in a blur. I mingled with the other parents, keeping a close eye on Amanda and Mark as they worked the room. They were careful not to get too close, but I could see the small tells, the way their eyes lingered on each other, the shared smiles that spoke volumes. Finally, the moment arrived. As the event drew to a close, the MC announced one last presentation, a video celebrating the PTA's hard work and dedication. The lights dimmed, and the projector screen came to life. The audience clapped as the video began, a montage of smiling children, successful fundraisers, and happy volunteers. And then the tone shifted. The screen cut to a series of photos. Amanda and Mark at the boutique hotel, their names clearly visible on the receipts. A close-up of the bank statements, showing the misused PTA funds. The photo of Amanda in the hotel room, her dress slightly wrinkled, with Mark grinning in the background. Gasps filled the room as the images played out in silence, each one more damning than the last. The murmurs grew louder, parents exchanging shocked glances as the evidence unfolded before them. The final slide was the email thread between Amanda and Mark, complete with timestamps that overlapped with her so-called planning sessions. Beneath it, in bold letters, was a single line. This is what happens when personal indulgence comes before community trust. The room erupted. Amanda froze in place, her face pale and her eyes wide with horror. Mark stood stiffly beside her, his composure unraveling as the crowd turned to look at them. Whispers turned into full-blown accusations, parents demanding explanations, teachers shaking their heads in disgust. I stayed in the corner, watching it all unfold. Amanda rushed to the stage, trying to speak over the chaos, but her voice faltered. "This is a mistake," she stammered, but no one was listening. The damage was done, and there was no coming back from it. The school board members in attendance wasted no time taking action. By the end of the night, Mark had been escorted out of the venue, his job as principal hanging by a thread. Amanda, meanwhile, was left to face the wrath of the parents she'd deceived. When we got home, she tried to confront me, tears streaming down her face as she begged for an explanation. I stayed calm, handing her a folder with the evidence I collected. "This isn't just about us," I said. "It's about accountability. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everyone who trusted you." She packed a bag that night and left, her sobs echoing through the house as the door closed behind her. The fallout from the gala spread quickly. Amanda resigned from the PTA the next day, and the school launched a formal investigation into the misused funds. Mark was fired within a week, his reputation in ruins. Amanda tried to salvage her social standing, but the community had already turned its back on her. As for me, I filed for divorce the following week. It wasn't just about ending the marriage, it was about reclaiming my life. Amanda's betrayal had broken something in me, but exposing her lies gave me a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible. Now, as I sit here writing this, I feel lighter. The pain of her betrayal is still there, but so is the satisfaction of knowing I didn't let her walk away unscathed. She wanted to play games with our marriage, our family, and our community. I made sure she lost.